Hello, how are you? I'm smiling because I was just doing some dance moves. So, anyway, today is June 3rd, which makes it the third day of Uterine Cancer Awareness Month. So, every day in the month of June, I am committed to posting very valuable information regarding uterine health and uterine cancer because, of course, it aligns with the mission of this channel. So, welcome back to day 3. So, my full disclaimer is I am not a medical doctor and everything is listed in the description. So, let's get into day 3. So, I want you to pin 2 things. So remember yesterday on day 2, I casually mentioned how I had a colonoscopy recently, and I highly encourage you to go get your own colonoscopy, right? Make your appointment. And so put a pin right there. And then secondly, I mentioned Dr. Kimmy Dahl and how I was going to go get her book because she had a book signing. So I got her book right here. Yay. I'm going to do a video about this soon because it aligns, of course, with this month and this channel. And so during it was a great job, a great conversation. And during the Q&A, someone asked a question regarding hereditary type of diseases and things of that nature. I don't really remember the full question, but Dr. Dahl mentioned in her response to the person, she mentioned Lynch Syndrome, which I remember seeing yesterday in my research. And I thought, oh, I just saw that. And then she said something briefly about colonoscopy. And I says, what? So I immediately knew that day 3 was going to be about Lynch syndrome and the connection to colonoscopy and uterine cancer. So guys, let's get into it. So of course I did a quick internet search and the AI review came up and it gave me a definition of what Lynch syndrome is. So Lynch syndrome is an inherited genetic condition that significantly increases your risk of developing types of cancer, multiple types of cancer, most notably colorectal, which is colon, and endometrial cancer, which is the uterine cancer. So this used to be known as the HNPCC, which is the hereditary non-polycystic colorectal cancer. And then they changed it to the Lynch syndrome, which I did not look up why they changed it to the Lynch syndrome, which I might need to do that. But I thought that it was pretty interesting that the Lynch syndrome is something that's inherited, a genetic condition that increases your chances for multiple cancers. I thought that was pretty interesting. And it made me think about how in one of my previous videos, as I was sharing my uterine health journey with you, how having a medical legacy I felt was so important, of knowing what are the causes of death of family members, all type of childbirthing experiences, who had a stroke in your family, who had a heart attack, hypertension, glaucoma, diabetes, etc. Right? Because I think it's important for us to know this. And after learning about Lynch syndrome, I think it's all the more important, to be perfectly honest with you. It also kind of made me think after I read this definition, which is why when you go to the doctor, especially when you go to the doctor initially, they ask you about your family history. And so the doctors, when they're asking that, they're checking for a pattern themselves. So that's why I think it's so important for when we go to the doctors that we're honest and we don't hold any secrets back. And it can be hard because we want to know why you need to what's going on with my mother. I'm here about me. But it could be something that they know that we don't know that could help us get better health care, right? And it kind of also made sense to me too when I just had my colonoscopy. I made sure I was so adamant because as things change in my family, I do tell my doctor. My primary care doctor is who I usually tell. And so she can put it in notes. Any other doctor that I see can go check the notes. And so when I was talking to the colonoscopy doctor, I was telling him that, my cousin had just recently died from colon cancer. And he was like a few years younger than I am. And I thought, that would be beneficial information, which I'm sure it was. But the question that he asked me was, well, has your mother or father had any colon cancer or any colon? And I was just like, no. But in my mind, I'm thinking, well, why are you asking me about my mother and my father? I just told you about my cousin, my first cousin. And it kind of made sense because as I was reading and doing research, it says that this type of hereditary gene can come from one parent or maybe both, who knows. So that's why it made me think that's why he asked the question about my mother and father, because he wanted to know. So maybe there was more of a risk, and maybe if I would have told him yes, maybe he would have known to act in a different, proceed in a different way of looking at me differently. So it's important when we're filling out these forms and we are telling our doctors something and updating them on our family history, that they know, because they may start looking at the science and linking stuff together, hopefully never to misdiagnosis, but hopefully to give us proper and better medical care. But again, I think it's so important to have that medical history of your family as well. Especially, something may, you see people that, they had hypertension in their family or they had diabetes in their families, and their children are very strategic about, I'm going to change my eating habits. I'm going to do this way because, my mom died of this, my dad died of this. And so I'm going to make a change. So they can break that cycle of whatever's on the bloodline for their families, right? So that's kind of interesting to know that this can lead to multiple cancers. So the causes of this. So the condition, and this is kind of heavy for me, this made me really think about in the Bible where it says we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And so I'm just giving you a highlighted level explanation. You need to really dig a little deeper to get if you're concerned about this, to get the causes and where it comes from. But the condition is caused by an inherited mutation, which is a gene, in one of several DNA mismatch repair genes. When I think about how wonderfully we're made, that we have DNA mismatch repair genes. So we have genes out there repairing genes. I think that that's wonderful. And as they're fixing these genes, errors can happen. And when these errors happen over time, they can cause cells to grow out of control and they can become cancerous. So this is a high level view. Again, I say if you need more explanation, if it wasn't explained correctly to you, I say that you go do a little more research. But I thought about this, and when I read this definition, I thought about the story years ago that I saw about one family having a certain type of gene for breast cancer in their family. And the women, once they found that out, they decided to be proactive. And I can't remember what they did, but they became proactive, knowing that they got tested, first of all, and they found out that they had the gene, whoever had the gene, and then they became proactive. And so I don't know if they had their breast removed, I don't know if they had the gene removed, I don't know what they did, but this kind of made me think about this, because they realized, evidently, they had the historical medical facts about their family and realized this gene is on the bloodline. Hey, let's be proactive about this instead of reactive. So that's what it's kind of made me think about it. So Lynch syndrome, individuals with Lynch syndromes have a substantially higher lifetime risk of developing cancers. And these cancers can strike at a much younger age, which is around 50, or maybe before 50. And these are the type of cancers that are associated with this. So colorectal cancer is the most common, which is colon cancer. So I think that if you have that gene in your family and they diagnose you with Lynch syndrome, then you know that you have a high chance of getting colorectal cancer. And how it relates to us here on the channel with uterine cancer is it also say this is one of the cancers. This is the second most common, particularly high in women. So this is the second most common cancer, particularly high in women when it comes to this Lynch syndrome, right? So that's why I think it's very important that we start, paying attention to the medical history of our family members. Especially our parents. And other cancer risks, you can have cancer of the ovary, stomach, small intestines, pancreas, biliary tract, urinary tract, the brain, and the prostate, and they said others as well. So, these are some of the cancer risks when you're being diagnosed with Lynch syndrome. But remember, this is something that's inherited. It's a gene. So they say. So how do you know if you have Lynch syndrome? If you suspect you have a family history of early onset cancers, you should consult, they're saying, a genetic counselor, a specialist is recommended to evaluate your risk and develop a personal plan for you and maybe even your family, like we saw in the case, like I saw in the case with the women with the breast cancer. So if you think about, if you go through your family and you're like, okay, they do have this and it was on early onset of cancers, then that's something you should talk to your doctor about. Matter of fact, I think you should talk to your doctor about everything so they can put everything in their files so they can just kind of say, wait, didn't she tell me something like this? And then so they can then, maybe refer you to a specialist for that. And a lot of times, we are seeing that people do request things of doctors and they don't give them. There's all these battles with health insurance as well. But you know what? If you think this is something serious, if you think this is, something, if you pay attention to your family medical history and you think that you need to be tested for this or, genetically, I would, push and advocate for yourself as much as possible. But again, with all of these things I'm speaking to you about now and throughout the month, I highly suggest that you talk to a medical professional and a doctor about these things. So, so there's management and prevention as well. So when a person is diagnosed with Lynch syndrome, it does not mean that cancer is in your future. It doesn't mean that at all, because again, we see some things that affected the previous people in our family and our ancestors, and it may not affect us because maybe it's the way we're living is different, or maybe we just chose not to go down that road that they're living. So, so it doesn't mean that you're going to get cancer. But because that gene is there, you've been diagnosed. If you've been diagnosed, it says, with Lynch syndrome, then there's usually some proactive measurements that you can do to, stay on top of it. So it's better to know than not to know, right? And one of the things that they talk about is having frequent screening. And one of the things is having regular and early screenings like colonoscopies. And I know that I've been seeing lately that the age used to be 49 for a colonoscopy. I think they now brought it down to 45. But even with that, I saw a doctor recently talking that he had to tell somebody in their 30s that they had colon cancer. And this gentleman had been bleeding from the anus, for over a year. And they kept telling him it was hemorrhoids because they couldn't believe he was 30 and he would have any kind of cancer because science doesn't show that. But I often wonder if the doctors who see the patients are telling you that our patients are younger and younger, how come that doesn't make it to the insurance company so that people in their 30s that are experiencing something maybe get a will approve you to take this test for this time to see what's going on? That kind of like throws me off a little bit, that people can't get what they need because they're battling their insurance their insurance companies as well. So, having regular screenings of your colonoscopy, which can detect if you have precancerous growths like the polyps. And so in full transparency for me, in my recent colonoscopy, they found 3 polyps. They were non-cancerous, the doctor told me. But he did say that one was kind of suspicious to him that, had I not had a colonoscopy or never came for a colonoscopy, it could have developed into cancer. So, but they were able to remove it and it's fine. I just have to come back in 5 years to have another colonoscopy. And I think they're also changing that. I don't think they're giving people the whole 10 years like they used to as well. So this is just a sidebar, but just wanted to let you know that it is important for you to do your regular upcoming screenings that they do say that you should start taking if you're, 10, 12, 50, 60 or whatever. I think it's important just to take it. And then there are also preventive measures outside of just doing your frequent screening. Some individuals opt for surgeries, like if it's a woman and you know that you have been diagnosed with, Lynch syndrome, then you might have your hysterectomy, you might have your uterus removed, and anything that you can do so that you don't have to have or face that opportunity that may come your way of endometrial or ovarian cancer risk, which makes me think about the ladies that with the breast cancer gene in their family. So I'm not sure again what they did, but whatever they did, they did proceed in doing something so that they don't have to face the risk of breast cancer. So per usual, I have provided you with several articles of reference, and I'm going to put them in the description below. But the first one is from the CDC, and this was something written in April 2026. I try to find articles or things that's written in the last, I try to do 3 years because I know research takes time to publish. But this one was entitled About Lynch Syndrome, Hereditary Colorectal Colon Cancer. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And I do look at these articles before, I just don't post stuff. And the second one I found was from the Cancer Prevention Foundation, and it was written March 2025, Understanding Lynch Syndrome, the Genetic Link to Colorectal Cancer, right? And the reason why you may think, well, this also colorectal cancer, but since it has that link to uterine cancer, I thought these are important too as well. And the last article was from the Ovarian Cancer Action, and it was from someone in London. There's no date on it, but it's the Lynch Syndrome, Everything You Need to Know. I thought, everything was pretty, they provided a lot of information to break stuff down. And again, I know hearing something about the Lynch Syndrome and all of these cancers can be very, over stimulating and scary, but that's not my point of, sharing the information, right? And when I'm reading these articles and scanning them for information, like in the last article from the UK, it actually says that 1 out of every 125th person gets diagnosed with, Lynch syndrome. So not everybody has it. It's probably one of those weird things, but I think it's good to know as an option as you're thinking about things, so you know that this is out there. Or if your doctor happens to mention it, you can say, oh yeah, I remember from the Uterine channel, Jill speaking about it, right? And for me, I always think it's better to know than not to know. And I believe in having a lot of information at our disposal. Sometimes having too much information, you're like, okay, enough. But then just having like these high level tips that I'm showing, I think that can be very informative. Who knows? So I want to, again, I'm giving you this information because I hope that it encourages you. Again, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just finding out information and I am just sharing it with you. Again, I know how it can be very hard sometimes if you're dealing with something, doing your own research, learning about things, but I'm also not a gatekeeper, and I don't want to have secrets. I don't want to have the shame and not being able to share. I mean, I just shared my colonoscopy results with you. I want to share so that we can start having these positive conversations with each other as women and men and our younger people, so that we can help combat and be proactive in the next generation and our generation as well. So one of the things, like I did yesterday when I started talking at the end about holding myself accountable, one of the things today, it really encouraged me to ask better health questions of my family and encourage them to stop keeping secrets, right? Because sometimes conversations can be so hard when we ask, well, what happened to grandpa or grandma? It may be hard for your mother or father to talk about it because they remember the pain of the loss, but you just want to know the symptoms, like what was it? What did they say? Although, yeah, I was going to say, although they say might what have happened, that may not have been the diagnosis, because you do hear people get misdiagnosed as well. But, this has encouraged me to have these tough conversations and to take better notes as they talk, because I know the other day my mom was talking about something that she went to a doctor and the doctor told her that if she goes on like she is, because her job was, she was just having a lot of stress, she could have a stroke. And I was just like, what? But I wasn't paying attention. So I'm going to relive that conversation and I'm going to start, having it, little by little, piece by piece. So what age were you when the doctor said that, and what was going on at the time? So that I can kind of understand, because I do know, and we hear it all the time, stress is a silent killer, especially for women, Black women out here just trying to make ends meet. It can be very, very difficult and stressful. So I am definitely believing having a historical health information about your family could not only save your life, but it can also save the life of future people. So when we think about, leaving generational wealth, that's great. But if we don't leave them with the tools to live to enjoy it, then somebody else is going to enjoy it. It may not even be your own family, the things that you're leaving for your family. So let's all get together and have conversations as nicely as possible. My family's having a meeting. We're having a little memorial for my upcoming cousin's cousin who died from colon cancer, and he has a son. So I have already put in my mind that I will be talking to his son, just, gently to, hopefully encourage him to go get a screening because that was his dad, and to talk to some of the other people in my family to see if they've had, my cousins, to see if they've had their, colonoscopies and going to their doctors and things of that nature. You want to be gentle with people because who is she to come ask me all these questions? I'm Judith, I'm asking. So I think there's just a way to kind of gently say these things to people, and hopefully that encourages you to do the same, especially when it comes to our seniors. Those are some tough cookies, making sure that they're doing all that they have to do to stay healthy and well as long as God has them here on the earth. So I hope the information about the Lynch syndrome and its relation to colonoscopy and uterine cancer was very informative for you. And I hope the articles that I put inside of the description, well, if you want more information about it, that will be very helpful to you as well. So don't forget, have wonderful conversations with your family, when they share recipes, ask them something, slip the health stuff in there if you can. Any kind of way you can get some information out of people is very valuable. So until next time, I'm going to be faithful. And so I will see you on day number 4. Until then, have a great day.